Mike Huseman, John Vogel, welcome in to Gridiron Eve tonight. Week 10. Week 10, Who's? Can you believe it?
I can't. It is remarkable how fast it's went. We got together in August and September, and here we are. Action has already started. So that tells you how fast it's gone. We had two games last night. Central Michigan at home in a tie over in Illinois, and Toledo took care of Buffalo. And we got two more action games tonight, so it should be fun. And then we got some very good Thursday games tomorrow night. Good three games that should all be exciting, with TCU at Texas Tech, Wake it travels to Duke, and South Alabama Troy in one of the better Sun Belt games we'll see all year.
Yeah, I'm happy to say that I'll actually not be doing anything Thursday night other than watching football for a change, so it's going to be great. I'm going to enjoy it.
Absolutely.
It's been a while since I've had the chance to sit and watch some games. Usually have something going on. Not tomorrow.
Good for you. That's awesome. Yeah.
So finally, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
So week in review, Hughes. I don't think things went too well for you this week.
They didn't. No, I was trying to think, and I think week 1 or week 2 of last season is the last time I've had a deficit as big as I do after last week. 15 points, so the equivalent of 3 games, or 2 if a double challenge is in there. But to recap our four games from last week, you were on UCF.
I was on West Virginia.
Or you were on West Virginia, yeah. But yeah, UCF minus 6.5 I challenged and did not go my way. West Virginia looked good in that one. Got the job done. I was on North Texas plus 7.5 against Memphis, and that was the only challenge I won. I was fortunate to do that, and I was fortunate. They were within a possession of covering most of the game, but it was by no means a given. There were multiple points in that game when they were down by 2 possessions.
Yes.
And was fortunate they come back, and North Texas got, I believe, 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. So I did cover that one. In the first double challenge in GE history, you picked Georgia minus 14.5, and they got it done for you. I thought the Gators would cover and do some of the things that they did well against Tennessee. They did do some of them, but Georgia was just so much better than they were, and easily manhandled them and won that game. It was one of those where I don't think Florida played terrible or is that bad. Georgia was just that much better, which good for you for identifying that.
Georgia's gotten a lot better over the course of the season, because I think at the beginning of the year we were all worried about, Carson Beck's not Stetson Bennett, and all that. All the Todd Monken's not there calling plays anymore. But I mean, when you look at like that team and just defensively, first off, they're still absolutely dominant.
Yeah.
And then on the offensive side, they've gotten better every week. Carson, and they've started to figure out what Carson does well. And you saw Jim. I don't know if you saw it, Jim Nagy tweeted about him this week, Senior Bowl director, saying that there's only one guy he's talked to in the league that doesn't think Carson Beck's a Senior Bowl guy. So we're talking about Carson Beck being a draftable NFL prospect at quarterback. So there's that. I think that says a lot about him right there.
I didn't see that tweet. No, that's good to know though. And at the end of the day, maybe they're one of those teams that should be trending and doing better this time of year. I mean, if you just break it down on a full roster examination, they're probably the best in the country. Certainly them, Ohio State and Bama would be the top 3. Texas would be up there too. But, I mean, there are not many gaps in that roster. And from the time Kirby took over, they really built it by developing a lot of depth on the O and D line, and that shows because they can put D linemen in waves and still cause disruption and stop the run.
Yeah, they just keep and they've been doing that for years. There's been 3 shifts that they run through there. It's been amazing.
It's weird defensively, the way like they've set up their blueprint is a lot like 90s Florida State did with Bowden, when you would just have so much speed all over, and you really didn't need to blitz much to get after the passer, and everybody else could just sit back and you weren't going to throw on him effectively.
Right. But yeah, so was there one more game, or is that the last one?
Yeah, no. I challenged you on the Oregon State Arizona, and I had Oregon
Arizona
State
won outright. Yeah,
they did. I had Oregon State -3.5. Arizona won by 3, and that was late. I'm East Coast. I only saw the first half of it, but that was two good teams, and this Arizona team is playing a lot better. And I will again. Everybody, that looks at them thinks, Coleman, Wiley, but then it's McMillan and Cowing, and now they have Fafita in at QB. But if you look at the advanced numbers, their O-line and D-lines are playing really well, and both sides of the trenches are really improved from where they were before. So that Arizona is a team who definitely trending when they should be right now, and they're getting
they got hot. They got and when you look at their last few games too, it was kind of easy to identify that game as Oregon State game as a trap, because
it was, yeah.
First off, I remember this years ago. Oregon was like the number 2, number 3 team in the country. Justin Herbert was the quarterback. They went down to Arizona State, and they played a struggling Arizona State team led by a freshman named Jaden Daniels. And in that game, they were absolutely humiliated.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that had to do with the weather. You go from a cold, wet climate to a dry, a warm climate. And that's a tough trip for that type of a team to make, just because of the practice elements. It's a whole nother level of atmosphere. And so we had seen Arizona travel really well on the road, and you knew they were going to come back. They're already adjusted to that climate. It's a lot different, especially this time of year. And I just thought Arizona was one of those, they're peaking at the right moment, and they were going to catch Oregon State, and I think that's what we saw.
Yeah. And I had made the comment last week where in one of the reasons I took Oregon State is the teams Arizona had played well against were teams who were spreading out and to get to the perimeter. We hadn't seen them be effective and beat teams that were going to put tight ends in the game and run the ball a lot, but that the next two games would show us that because they had Oregon State, and then this coming week, Arizona has UCLA in a game neither of us picked for this week. But Arizona passed the test against Oregon State. Now I don't know if they'll beat UCLA on that. That remains to be seen. That game is in Tucson again, but I think it'll be competitive either way. I don't think either of those teams will run away with it.
Absolutely agree. Be another good week. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'll be at the UAB and Florida Atlantic game this weekend in Birmingham.
Okay.
That'll be at 2:00 Central, kick 3 Eastern. So I am not watching a lot of football this weekend. I'm going to because I'm at a game. And ironically, the week that I choose to go to a game, ESPN decides to drop a red zone version of college football. So
I saw that. Yeah.
Great, amazing. So you'll have to tell me all about it next week and tell me how it was, because I'm sure you'll be checking it out.
I will. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. But going to UAB should be fun.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Trent Dilford down there with that team. It's a 1.5 point spread. I think Florida Atlantic's favored. I almost thought about jumping on it, but I was like, I'm gonna leave it alone for the show. Just mention it. That I'll be there.
And for the people out there that don't know this, his offensive coordinator is Alex Mortensen, Chris Mortensen's boy. So he was a former analyst at Alabama and had been a coaching assistant with a few teams in the NFL. But they're doing interesting things, so it should be a fun game for you. I hope you have a good time there.
I'm sure I will. I always seem to run into people I know, which is always great. So
yeah.
As we look into this week, Hughes, getting into round 1, I went ahead and put the rankings on with the top teams this week.
Perfect.
Now that we have the college football playoff rankings out, which after this we probably need to get into should Ohio State actually be number 1. But Notre Dame -3 over Clemson.
I like Notre Dame is a team who I've picked them a few times this year, and not always for the good either. I picked them against Louisville when they just got destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been right and wrong about Notre Dame, but in this game, I trust them to make less mistakes, is largely what this is coming down to. They're not turning the ball over, and on defense, they are forcing turnovers. They're also really good on D at forcing teams off of the field on third down. Clemson's not a good third down team. They're also not great at setting. They're not. Let me start. They're not good at it because they're not setting themselves up for success at it. They're getting a lot of third and longs. Klubnik has shown flashes, but he's not the guy we thought he might be last year. He's not been consistently accurate and making good decisions. Notre Dame, and another thing that impressed me in looking at them, their red zone offense is very efficient. They're almost always scoring points. So that's another, and I don't think this game will be really high scoring. The over-under, I have the line here, but I remember looking at it and thinking I'd probably bet 44.5 is what it is, and that's probably where it should be. And that's even dropped a little bit, but with Estime and that front they have, even though Clemson's front seven is decent on defense, I like Notre Dame to cover 3 points in this one and get a win.
Yeah, I thought about it too, and a couple things here that are interesting is that the home team has won 3 straight in regular season meetings between Clemson and Notre Dame. Clemson obviously at home here, but the Tigers are 3-2 straight up and 2-3 against the spread since 2015. So even when they were a top team the last few years, they've struggled. They've outright struggled. So what that kind of tells me is when I look at this, Clemson, four losses on the year already, 4-4 at this point, which is, we're not used to seeing this at all from them.
No.
Not in the Dabo Sweeney era. And it's been a couple losses that are just unexplainable. Miami on the road to double overtime. North Carolina State last week. While the defense is still playing pretty well, I think that Notre Dame's gonna win this game outright, and I think they're gonna be able to cover 3. I think it's probably gonna be a touchdown. It might even be more than that. And I don't think this game's gonna be particularly close to overtime. So, not gonna challenge you there, Who's.
Yeah, been a decade. 2011 was the last time Clemson had 4 losses in a season, and they finished 10-4 that year. So that tells us how consistent Dabo has been since then.
Yeah. And so I would dare say that Notre Dame may actually score more points on them than anybody has this year, which is Florida State leads that at 31. And they may win by double digits. I could see that absolutely happening, especially when you consider who's the offensive coordinator this year at Clemson. Do you remember?
Garrett Riley.
Oh,
yeah.
Wait,
TCU at
what scheme is he running right now?
They're kind of doing a modified air raid, is what some people would call it. Yeah.
Yeah, modified air raid, but it's a lot like his brothers over there at USC, ain't it?
Similar. Yeah, they're probably trying to inside run a little more, but that might be more of a matter of personnel and having Shipley and not the elite playmaking receivers.
And Notre Dame handled this really well. It might
sure did. Yeah.
It might be double digits, so I'm there with you.
Yeah.
I like Boston College at 1.5 over Syracuse, so staying in the ACC here in the first round. Boston College has done pretty darn well for me here so far. I believe I agreed with you when you picked them against Florida State in the spread in the red bandana game. If you hadn't picked that, I would have picked that. I think the spread was 17 or 18.5 that day.
Yeah, it was a lot, whatever it was.
They've actually won 4 straight, believe it or not. Boston College is 5-3 right now with wins over Virginia, the wins over Army, Georgia Tech, and Connecticut last week. Syracuse, on the other hand, by the way, this is a Friday game if you didn't know. Syracuse, on the other hand, is on a 3-game losing skid. Losses to North Carolina, Florida State, and a blowout loss to Virginia Tech last week. The Syracuse team is really struggling. at this point. I think we've seen this the last few years from them, where they start real hot and then they get into some real problems that they can't seem to overcome, whether it's injury, whether it's just coaching scheme. Not entirely sure what exactly it is, but they're on a downward skid yet again, coming off of a loss to a team that they shouldn't be losing to in Virginia Tech, especially not at that margin.
No.
I like Boston College at plus 1.5 here. I think Jeff Hafley, with the personnel that he has, is somehow managing to put out a really good team every week and play up to the best of their ability. I don't trust Syracuse to play up to that either.
No, BC's another team, and I think this speaks to your notion that they're well coached. The same thing we said with Arizona. BC is consistently getting better every week. They're the team I've been the most snake bit with this year in picking them. I very rarely have I picked them right, one side or the other. I think I didn't spot the trend that they were improving, and after those first couple games, I just kind of wrote them off. And I made errors in doing that. But this Syracuse team is just not doing many things right now. They're dinged up. I legitimately think that this could be Dino's last game. It would not shock me if he loses his job if they lose this game. Because they've been so bad in the second half of the seasons in the last few years, and nobody wants to see that. And it's also unexplainable to some, and unexcusable as well. But it would not, if BC handles business. I'm not challenging this one for those of you that didn't pick up on that. If BC handles their business here, I think there's a realistic chance that Dino gets a pink slip on Sunday. Or Saturday, possibly, since the game's Friday.
Now, the underdog is also 10-3 in this series against the spread, with 8 outright upsets since 2003. 2003. So trending that way as well, with just this series in general. Whoever is not favored to win usually does really well and plays up into this game. So I like Boston College winning it outright.
Okay.
Moving on to round 2. Wow, you have jumped on the train. Look at that. You're taking number 8 Alabama -3 over 13th LSU.
Yeah, I have not yet picked Alabama. Like they've not been on my side any week this year. I've picked them to lose, or the other team to cover rather, on multiple occasions, but this is the first time I'm siding with Bama. They are another team who really seems to have figured things out. That defense is playing well. They are causing a lot of turnovers. They're rushing the passer well. Teams are not running the ball against them. And LSU overall has the 88th ranked defense in the country. That's not good. Now, I've been critical of a lot of Bama's offense, and Milroe specifically. They have come upon the winning formula for them, though. You let him find wide open guys, and if it's not there, you let him run for a first down with a good mixing in of handing McClellan the ball. That's working for them. They're both moving the chains, and they're finding a lot of big plays down the field. LSU was also allowing a ton of big plays down the field. I just don't see a scenario here where LSU can both shut down Bama and score a lot of points on their own. So, Jaden Daniels is legit. He is a guy that people are talking about in the Heisman race. I've been reticent to put him in there because I think they're going to lose too many games. I think this will be their third loss of the year. But he's good. Don't get me wrong. In all the scenarios that I think can happen here, I don't see LSU's D shutting down Milroe and then them doing enough on offense to be able to win. So that's my take there.
Yeah, this is a tough one, because obviously Alabama has done really well here since that loss to Texas. I guess you could really say the close one to USF was probably the last really tough game that they had. We've seen the defense step up and play extremely well.
Yeah.
Since Texas,
the A&M game was close, but the A&M game was close, but they were definitely the better team, especially after halftime.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the Tennessee game last week showed that this team is resilient and they can come out and they can handle their business.
Yeah.
This is another revenge game for the Tide.
Yeah. Another way to put it, like you just did, saying they're resilient. I think in the style they're playing, they can quote unquote get punched in the mouth and still get back up. I think they're pretty tough, and that's probably a trickle down of the coaching and the guys they're recruiting. They can handle adversity and still come back from it. Good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's two concerns. Number one, both the last two times LSU has beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, they've been ranked number one in the country.
Okay.
2019
was Nick Saban the coach for one of those teams?
No. This is 2019, Joe Burrow.
Okay.
And 2011 when they ended up rematching. With Les Miles, rematched for the national championship.
And Bama just shut him down in the national title game.
Yep. Yeah. But those are the last two times LSU's beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
Wasn't that regular season one 9-6 with 5 field goals?
Yep. Yes, it was. Yeah. It was an atrociously terrible game to watch. Yeah. But we loved it because it was 1-2 and it was a heavyweight defensive battle.
And so many NFL guys on both of those defenses that year too.
Tide are just 2-4 against the spread. The last 6 matchups between these teams as well. That's another interesting little tidbit. They're 9-2 straight up, but since 2011, but they're 2012 when they won that game. So really 9-3, you could say, going back to that time. But 2-4 against the spread. It's just I've been picking Alabama all year. I've been picking all year.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah.
And I'm looking at this matchup, and I'm looking at this LSU offense. I'm going, I know that this Alabama defense is really good, but are they going to be able to score more points than LSU? And I'm not exactly confident in that. I'm actually going to go ahead and challenge you on this.
Okay.
I'm taking LSU.
Okay.
And it's because I look at this, and I know that they're not number one. I know all this, but this is a really good offense right now. And I don't know if Alabama's got enough offense to take care of business there. LSU's defense has gotten much better over the last few games. After the Missouri win, 39, where they allowed 39, they allowed 18 to Auburn and then shut out Army, which I don't care what you think about Army. That's tough to do. So
it's also probably the worst QB in that conference they played, too. Like, Thorne has not been – he actually was really good last week, but before that, Thorne hadn't been well, so – that is one of those stats you threw out there that's absolutely legitimate and true. It just isn't swaying me at all off of my side. So, yeah.
Hey, you made the pick. It's okay.
Yep.
But so moving to the Sun Belt, staying in the South, but going to Sun Belt here. I like Georgia State at +5.5 over James Madison. And let's get this straight. James Madison is pissed off right now because they didn't get into the college football playoff rankings. Yeah. They were not ranked. Georgia State, on the other hand, has probably the best offense in the Sun Belt. I think that when you look at their consistency, they're 6-2 on the year. They've been pretty well outside of the Troy game. That's the best defense in the conference. They've scored a lot of points in every game. It's been at least 20 to Louisiana. And outside of that, it's 27, 41, 30, 35, 42. They put up points. There's Granger's taking a step this year.
They're certainly the most well-balanced offense in the conference, that's for sure. Yeah.
Now, last year, Georgia State was the team that beat James Madison, 42-40.
Yep.
James Madison's defense is a little bit better. So is Georgia State's. I think it's a tough one, but I think Georgia State finds a way to get it done. They're going to take them down at home, and obviously cover 5.5.
This is my weekly I'm not touching it game. Like right when I saw that line, like, I feel like this line is right where it should be. I'm like, that's almost exactly what I would make it. I'm not so sure Georgia State does outright win, but I don't see this game being more than a possession either way. For a lot of the reasons you said. I mean, this JMU defense is good. They have beaten everybody they played, and they've shut down, Georgia Southern throws the ball really well. South Alabama is pretty mixed. Marshall, who was without Ollie, but none of those teams did much against JMU. But Marcus Carroll and Granger together are a different animal on the ground.
Yep.
And Granger's made that step forward where he can do just enough in the throwing game where you have to stay honest both front and back of your defense. So this is, right when I saw this one, I'm like, this one could go either way, so I'm not touching it.
Fair enough.
Which is the mark of picking a good game. Yeah.
I like it. I think the Georgia State's got a really good chance to win this one outright. So.
Absolutely. Is this game it's in Atlanta, isn't it? They're at home, right?
It is. It is in Atlanta. Yep.
Yeah.
They went on the road last year and made it a game. So, moving on to round 3, you'd like Kansas State, 23rd in the country, to cover 4.5 over 7th-ranked Texas?
I do, yes. This Kansas State team is another team who is getting better week by week. They were the conference champs last year. We've seen them every year. Kleiman's been there. They've effectively run the ball. They're very good in the trenches. They've also defended the pass well. Howard playing well at quarterback. Giddens, good running back, though he'll have his work cut out for him. Texas's D-line is probably the best in the country. If not, they're certainly up there. I just don't have faith that Malik Murphy can beat a good team yet. That remains to be seen. They dominated BYU last week, and Murphy was not asked to do anything. They got out in front early by running the ball, and a big their first touchdown, Worthy returned so BYU got the ball punted, Texas returned the punt for a touchdown, and they never looked back. Murphy was efficient. He was 16 of 25 for 160, 175 yards, somewhere in there, threw an interception. I just don't have faith yet that he can beat a top-notch, well-coached defense. Maybe they can win, but I like K-State to cover this.
Yeah, no, so I'm going to be honest. When I first saw this, I was going to challenge it.
Yeah.
And it's because Texas is probably the best they've been in a long time. I think this is the best Texas team we've seen.
Yeah.
But then I remembered Quinn Ewers isn't playing. That's not good. So, especially when you consider the Wildcats are 7-8 straight up in this series in the last 15 games and 10-5 against the spread. Okay, so it doesn't, and you typically the team who's ranked higher in this game doesn't do as well as they play as they're supposed to. Last year, Kansas State was ranked 13th. Texas was unranked. Texas won by a touchdown. A couple of years ago, when Kansas State they were ranked 20th, Texas was unranked. Kansas State lost 27-24. So it just seems like whoever is, and even when you look at some of the other years too, they might not be ranked, but Texas was considered better than they were, and they beat, and Kansas State won outright. Kansas State's got a really good chance to win this game outright, and it's because of what they can do with the fact that Quinn Ewers isn't playing, the fact that this offense is handcuffed right now, and they are playing extremely well. The last 3 games in conference play, they've scored 38, 41, and 41. So very consistently up there, scoring 6 possessions, 7 possessions. They're going to probably continue that. They might not. They might get 6 here. It might be more like a 20, or like a 34, like a that kind of score. Maybe even a 30. But Texas's offense, I'm going to say, isn't going to be able to score that to cover 4.5. So I like this one. I'm going to leave it alone.
Okay.
I'm taking this to the SEC. Last week, I liked Georgia taking care of business against Florida. A few weeks ago, I liked Georgia taking care of business against Kentucky. I like them taking care of business again here against Missouri. Granted, Missouri right now is playing extremely well. They're 7-1. They're ranked 12th in the country. We've seen some tremendous steps forward from their quarterback, Brady Cook. The offense, they've got some mismatched weapons across the board, and Luther Burden. Cody Schrader's been an awesome running back for them.
Yes. Yeah.
Defensively, they've been, outside of that LSU game, pretty good. They haven't been terrible. They've been pretty good. Last week,
they did better they impressed me on defense against Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And that was coming off of the LSU loss. They did well against Ray Davis.
Yeah, 21 points against Kentucky, 12 against South Carolina, 21 against Vanderbilt. I just think this Georgia monster right now is another beast. I think that going into Georgia is very difficult to do. We've seen a lot of really highly ranked teams try to go into Georgia and to win that game. They don't. Mizzou has won their first trip to Georgia in 2013, but they've lost all 4 since. I don't believe they've covered any of those games either. So that being said, with a spread at 15.5, I like Georgia to probably win by 4 touchdowns.
That's a big spread. Yeah. This is a tough one for me. And part of that is I got snake bit with Georgia last week. I had picked Florida to cover a similar spread, 14.5. So we're talking more than 2 touchdowns. And I feel like there's certainly value on Missouri at that spread, but I don't think we can. Or, sorry, let me rephrase that. I don't trust that Mizzou's defense can hold up enough to all the things Georgia's going to do, both run game, pass game. Georgia's good enough at everything to keep you off balance. You can't just play in the box to plug the run. You can't just drop back to defend the pass. Beck's doing enough good things. This Mizzou team's the best they've had in a long time, but I'm not going to challenge this one just because at the end of the day, I think they're a class below. It's one of those I'm going to kick myself if Mizzou keeps it within 10 points. But I feel like the more likely outcome here is like 38-17, something. I don't think it's going to get to the 4 touchdowns you had mentioned, but I think it's 20. It's a somewhere in that 18 to 24 point range. So 3-4 possessions. Because Georgia's not going to be awed by Luther Burden and Cook. I mean, even though he's the best receiver they've seen this year, they're not going to be fazed by that. And they may even take him away. Kirby's very good at taking away the other team's best weapon and making the other guys beat you. He's that guy. He's one of the best in the country. But I don't have... maybe saying I don't have it wrong. I have too much respect for Georgia to go against him in this case would be the best way to say it.
That's fair enough. Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Moving on to round 4. You like 9th-ranked Oklahoma taking care of business against 22nd-ranked Oklahoma State. Spread of 6.
Yes, our last Bedlam game in the foreseeable future. These teams will obviously be in different conferences next year. Yep. With Oklahoma going to the conference or the SEC. This is a series absolutely dominated by the Sooners. They hold the overall series record 91-19. I will say, I just wanted to throw that out there because it's a wild stat. I didn't base any of this pick off of that. Um, Oklahoma's coming off of their first loss of the year.
Yep.
Before that, they had been a good team. They were very efficient. Oklahoma State is a team who is playing a lot better than they were before. Um, they lost to South Alabama, just got rolled early in the year. Then they lost to Iowa State, but they beat a good Kansas State team by one possession. Then they beat a good Kansas team. Then they beat West Virginia and Cincinnati, who were both just kind of meh, I think, and not great. But I think Oklahoma will do a good job of regrouping after the loss. And I think they'll be composed enough to realize, yeah, it was a bad loss last week, but we can still accomplish all of our goals if we run the table. You know, if they win the rest of their games, they will be in the conference title game. And after that would lie the possibility of the playoffs if the right things go their way. They'll have to stop Ollie Gordon. He has been phenomenal for Oklahoma State the last few weeks. I think they do a good enough job of that. I think this game is probably pretty high scoring. I don't know that either team will stop the other one effectively. Most of Oklahoma's games have been relatively high scoring, especially the games the last month when they've been in conference play. But I think Dylan Gabriel gets back on track, and Oklahoma is able to find success through the air and running when they have to. And on defense, I think they can do just enough to not let Ollie Gordon have the 180, 200-yard games he's been having lately. So I'm going with the Sooners in this one.
Yeah, that's fair. And what's kind of interesting is, first off, this is the earliest that the Bedlam game has been played since 2007.
Interesting.
Typically, this is like this is toward the end of November that this game's played.
Well,
Not this year. Now, the other thing is the last 4 spreads on this game. Actually, the last 3 spreads have been single digits, to which the team favored has covered.
interesting.
In 2019, Oklahoma was favored by 13. They won by 18. So Oklahoma has covered 3 of the last 4 spreads, and all of them in which they've been favored. Oklahoma State, yeah, they're playing a whole lot better than they were at the beginning of the year when they were still trying to figure out their quarterback situation. They took a brutal 33-7 loss to South Alabama, and then another loss to Iowa State on the road the week after that.
Yeah.
They've stepped up and played a whole lot better coming off their homecoming. They beat Kansas State, they beat Kansas, they beat West Virginia on the road, and then Cincinnati at homecoming last week. But all that being said, yeah, I think that this is kind of a race to whoever gets to 40 first wins.
Could be. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
I'm going to go ahead and put that on Oklahoma at this point.
Okay.
So I'm not touching it. I'm agreeing with you. I think that's a really good spread. Oklahoma -6, and I think that Oklahoma covers it.
Yeah. Good to know. Yeah, that was one I was curious if you challenged that one because I felt like that's one of those games that could go either way that I like. So, yeah.
Now, staying in the Big Ten, we talked about the Big Ten a lot, or Big 12.
Big 12, yeah.
Excuse me. We talked about the Big 12 a lot this week, haven't we?
We have. Yeah, well, they got good games in it this week. Yeah.
They have great games in it this week, especially if you are a betting man, and we are betting men, Hughes. So I actually like the 5-3 BYU Cougars to cover 10 against the 5-3 West Virginia Mountaineers. And granted, it's been up and down, for them in the Big 10 this year, the Big 12 this year. Beat Arkansas on the road earlier this year. Lost to Kansas on the road the week after. Took care of business against Cincinnati and Texas Tech. Lost to TCU big. Lost to Texas big. I don't think West Virginia is the same type of team as these TCUs, as these Texases. I think West Virginia, while they're 5-3, probably you could argue should be 6-2.
Yeah.
I don't think they're as talented as this BYU team. They found their stride relatively early in the year after a really tough week 1 against Sam Houston. Granted, the TCU game terrible, Texas game terrible, but offensively, I think that this is a defense that they're going to be able to capitalize on and score points. I think that they're going to be able to hold this offense in check a good bit. I think it's a lot closer. I don't know if BYU wins it outright, but I like them to cover 10. I think that this is a single-digit game, and if West Virginia comes out with the win, they're going to have to fight for it. It's not going to be easy.
So, 100% agree with you that it's a single-digit game one way or the other, which means there's no point in challenging it. I do think West Virginia wins this game. I do not think it is by this much, though. They looked good against UCF last week, but West Virginia has already hit their win over for the season, or maybe it was this win would hit the over, but they're right on the brink anyway. But a lot of the people that were on them pointed out that their O-line is very veteran and one of the better in the conference, and they should be pretty efficient and running the ball all right, which they have been.
They got a great running back.
Yeah. What goes along with that is you're limiting possessions and making the game shorter. So covering those double-digit spreads is more difficult. You're right. Donaldson's a stud. He's a good player. But I just don't have the faith that they can win by 10 or more. You talked about BYU, and brought up a lot of good points about them. Their O-lines and D-lines are typically very big, physical, older guys who have come back from, they're playing 24, 25-year-olds in the trenches because these guys go on missions and come back. There's a maturity difference between 19, 20-year-olds at that point. And while I think West Virginia probably gets the W, I do not think they cover this. So that's what I say about that one.
Yeah, fair enough. One challenge so far, and we got one more round to go here. So we're kind of on the same page this week. So round 5, you like New Mexico State -2.5 over MTSU.
Yeah, Jerry Kill is one of the best coaches in the country, and I think he's proving it here. He did it at Northern Illinois, did it at Minnesota, but this New Mexico State team was god-awful when he took over. He's in year 2. They went to a bowl game last year, and they finished 7-6. This year, they're 6-3. But this game is for bowl eligibility because they're playing the 13 games again. They have to get to 7 to go to a bowl game. I think they do it this week. They are very good at running the football in a lot of different ways. They're on a 4-game winning streak. They beat FIU, Sam Houston. Then they went on the road to UTEP and Louisiana Tech, beat them. They're not scoring a ton of points. Most of their scores you're seeing there in the 20s. In fact, I don't think they've scored 30 since
since FIU. Yeah.
Yeah, and the game they lost to UMass in the opener is the only other game they've gotten 30. But they're a well-coached team that's not going to make mistakes. And the one thing that troubles me with this, where Middle Tennessee is good on defense, is counteracting what New Mexico State is good at on offense. Statistically, they looked like they were pretty good run-stopping defense. And I don't know that I trust Pavia enough to get it done through the air. But at home, I like them to cover this 2.5 points and get to bowl eligibility, largely because I feel like Jerry Kill is the right guy for this game. If you looked at his career on one of the stats I saw in looking at this, games where the spread was 7 points or less. So in one possession spread games, his record is unbelievable. And that tells me you're out coaching teams who you're similarly talented to. So that's why I'm going with the Aggies. minus 2.5 in this one.
Yeah, so did you know that Jerry Kill and Rick Stockstill faced off against each other one time before as head coaches?
I didn't know that, but considering how long they've both been head coaches, it makes a lot of sense.
So they faced each other in 2014 when Jerry Kill was at Minnesota.
Yeah.
Gophers were favored by 16, led 28-0 at the half. MTSU managed to score a touchdown and get a backdoor cover with 45 seconds to play.
Nice. Okay.
So this is not a 16-point spread. This is a 2.5-point spread. Yeah. And I think Pavia is a little bit better than you're giving him credit for being. Diego Pavia is a gritty, tough, smart quarterback.
Agree with both of those. Yeah, agree with all that.
And I think that I got the chance to see MTSU in person this year when they played Colorado State. That was a game they lost. They fought real hard to the end. They're really good. They're a really well coached team as well. But New Mexico State 4-game winning streak. The last conference game that they lost was to Liberty, who's undefeated. I'm not touching it. I'm kind of agreeing with you. I think that New Mexico State probably covers this and wins by 3 or more. I would even say that they might even approach double digits on the win. But I think it will be. I do think that the first 3 quarters will be close. Fourth quarter will be when they determine who the winner is. MTSU has been really inconsistent. You know, they've been hot and cold. The last 3 games, they've scored 30 points a game. 35 against Liberty in the loss. It's not enough to convince me because I look at some of those other games and go, yeah, but what about the 10 to Western Kentucky? That's not a great defense. What about it should have been 17 that they scored against Colorado State, but they got a late touchdown in that one. It probably should have been 28 against Liberty, but they got a late touchdown in that one. So just kind of that's what concerns me with them, and I'm not touching it.
Okay.
I like USC, 20th ranked USC to cover 3 against Washington, who's ranked 5th. Undefeated Washington. Now, this was the one that I was looking at, and it was I was debating whether I wanted to go with this one or go with something else. I picked this one, and it's because Washington the last few weeks has lost a ton of steam.
Oh, they've looked awful.
A ton of steam, Hughes. After that Oregon win, they played Arizona State at home. They won 15-7. Then they went to Stanford and had to fight to the end to get that out, 42-33. That's the 2 worst teams in the Pac-12. What were you doing? Game planning for USC the entire time? I don't think so. The underdog is 5-2 against the spread with 4 outright upsets in this series since 2009, which I think that's another key statistic here. USC is the underdog. I like Washington, but the one thing that we've figured out about Michael Penix is when he is in pressure, when he starts to feel pressure, he does not play well through it. I think that USC is going to be able to do whatever they want offensively. Washington's going to score with them, but it's going to be a shootout, and I like USC winning a shootout like this. I don't think that they have a defense that's going to be able to disrupt Caleb Williams and like some of the other teams that we've seen this year. I've been against USC here the last few weeks too, so I'm changing my tune here. I don't think that Washington's defense is going to be able to disrupt it enough, especially after surrendering 33 to Stanford, 24 to Arizona, 32 to Cal. I like USC to probably win this one outright.
Yeah, I almost picked this one on the same side as you. I think there's value in USC at this one. Washington certainly could rebound and get their mojo back, but this game doesn't profile to be one where that happens because it's not like either of these defenses, we're not expecting much out of them. I would be surprised if either of these teams scores below 35 in this game. It just feels like it's one of those where it could be like Washington's game with Oregon, where we have a 44-42, or USC's game against Arizona, where it was
Cal last week.
41. Yep, Cal. And USC's allowing a lot of points to some bad offenses, but Washington's D isn't lighting anybody up either. I mean, they did have the good defensive performance against Arizona State, who was minus, they're down the depth chart on QBs with Bourget playing. And then Washington, I mean, they allowed 33 points to Stanford and 32 to Cal. So they're not stopping anybody either. And this is one of those where I can't believe we went through a whole show and I didn't challenge any of the 5. But in week 10, I don't need to chase anything either. And I'm not going to make reckless ones just to try to claw points back. And I think to our credit, we agreed with each other on most of our picks this week. So that's probably what it came down to.
No, I think that's fair. And, I think that Washington, we talked about the brutal stretch that they have here, starting with USC on the road, Utah at home next week, and then Oregon State on the road.
Yeah.
It's going to be really tough. If they come out of here 2-1, that's an accomplishment.
And then the Apple Cup.
And that's going to say a lot about where they are.
Yeah. And the Apple Cup
Washington State.
Yeah.
Washington State, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that is, like, I hate the old adage, it's one of those games you can throw the record books out. That game kind of is one of those, though. Like, so many times the team who's the underdog has come in and pulled off a W like that. So, I don't see Washington getting out of their next 4 undefeated, which probably means...
So challenges...
I was going to say that might mean we don't have a Pac-12 team in the playoff. It's looking like, even though the Pac-12 may be the best conference, we might not have one of their teams in the playoffs. It'll be interesting.
So you have no challenges this week. The only one that I've challenged you is Alabama -3 over LSU. That's our single challenge, 5 points on the line this week. And so you're going to play the long game in this 15-point deficit that you're in. I respect it.
Yeah.
Really. I respect it. You're going to play the long game, and if you can claw back up the next few weeks, great. And I'm not chasing points either, up 15. And so
and maybe I'll
close all year.
Maybe I'll hit one of those double challenges in a few weeks. We'll see.
So I guess we'll start with the Heisman. And then I do want to touch on something before we get out of here. But after this week, who's the Heisman favorite?
Well, if LSU wins, it's probably Jaden Daniels. Right? I mean,
Probably.
Is it
Yeah.
if they win? I still think McCarthy is maybe the odds-on guy. Not that he'd win it right now, but looking where we expect Michigan to be or where I expect him to be, McCarthy's going to be up there. Bo Nix is a guy that might be trending in the right direction too. The same with Jordan Travis is going to be near the top if Florida State keeps winning games and wins the ACC. Certainly, if Washington keeps winning, Penix could get back into it too. He's not out of it by any means.
No.
I don't think Marvin Harrison has a shot. He does have there is a path there if he absolutely goes nuclear. The same with Luther Burden. If Burden goes off and just dominates against Georgia and, Mizzou finishes 11-1, well, maybe he would too if they win the SEC. But we're grasping at straws for both receivers there a lot. So I don't know that anyone outside of that list I just mentioned has a realistic chance.
Yeah. It's really tightened up here at the end of the year, and now we're going into the stretch of the Pac-12, going through a lot of games that'll be telling.
Yep.
And as wild as this may sound, what if Carson Beck goes nuclear at the end, the last 4 games of the year, puts up his best numbers? You think he's got a shot to work in there? Undefeated Georgia, potentially the number 1 team in the country.
To win it, no. To get an invite to be a finalist, yes.
Fair enough. Just throwing that out there. If he goes, averages 400 yards a game and throws, 14 touchdowns the last 4 games,
Yeah.
How do we keep him out of that conversation?
I think, especially geographically, he'd pull a lot of votes in SEC land, and I do think being a finalist is, that's a huge accomplishment. I think he could get there. I don't know if winning it is quite possible yet this year, though.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
What I wanted to talk about, though, is do you really think Ohio State's the number one team in the country?
I do not.
Okay, good.
No. Don't get me wrong. They're playing a lot better than they had been. And they're another team that hasn't really set a foot wrong in a few weeks. They're doing a lot of things right. I mean, they're impressive. But if it were me, I feel like that one's... So they would be 3 or 4 for me. I would have Georgia, Michigan 1, 2. I don't know the order. And I would have Ohio State, Florida State 3, 4 at this point. That's just where I would be. So I would have the same top 4. The order would not be the same, though.
So I understand the whole argument because I after the results were published last night, I tweeted about it and I said, who in their right mind would put Ohio State number 1 over Georgia or even Michigan for that matter right now? And it's just because I understand the resume argument. I got a lot of comments on it. People talking about the resume. Yeah. They beat Notre Dame. They beat Penn State. When you go back to that Notre Dame game, they didn't win on the field, though. That's kind of... I thought the whole point of having the playoff committee was to balance resume with results and all that different stuff. Ohio State, at no point this year, to me, has looked like the number 1 team in the country. At no point have we ever sat there and gone, yeah, they've got it all figured out. And granted, they are undefeated, but Penn State's offense has not been very impressive. A lot of their points have come late in games this year. And when they can't get that late stretch going like they couldn't against Ohio State, they had nothing. Yeah. Same thing, and then came back the next week and struggled against Indiana inexplicably. Notre Dame should have beat them. They beat them on the field.
They should have. Notre Dame should have won, yeah. I think the way I would word it to your notion would be, if you look at everybody's overall body of work to this point, Ohio State might have a case to be number 1. They do have a case to be number 1, certainly. But there's no week of the season where you and I would look back on a Sunday and say, right now they're the best team in the country. We would have never said that once about Ohio State. But cumulative body, sure, I get it. Like I'm not saying they're not a good team, but that's where I'm at with that.
I think the first argument against it was, resume, because when you do look at who Georgia's played so far, their toughest opponents have really been Kentucky and Florida. Yeah. Now they're going to have a good opponent this week. Tennessee will be a good opponent, and Ole Miss will be a good opponent as well. So they've got 3 games in their next 3-game stretch before they play Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see
that's going to be when they get to decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be, again, in Georgia, it's going to be tough. And Senior Day? Oh, it's Senior Day. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, their next
Sorry,
3
Lane.
games, their next 3 games are, that's a gauntlet. You got Mizzou at home, Ole Miss at home, and then you go up to Neyland. That's going to be a rough stretch. They're certainly one of the teams that can sustain that and win all 3 of them, but they could also drop one of them, too.
And I get the Michigan argument, too. That's why they're at 3 right now. It's because, again, who have they played? Their toughest opponents have really been Minnesota and Nebraska. Now they've got Purdue this week.
Yeah, who's garbage. Yeah.
They got Purdue this week. They got Penn State on the road the week after. They've got Maryland on the road, and then Ohio State. So their last 3-game stretch will say a lot about where they are as well. But I can't believe we're sitting here going, Ohio State is the number 1 team in the country. I just can't. I can't see it.
In the playoff era, we've probably never seen a playoff contender with the schedule as backloaded as Michigan's is this year. Like, to the point where you could almost say we don't know a lot about them. They have absolutely taken care of business in every game against teams we would expect them to take care of business against. Like, there's nothing that we've learned about them to this point. I happen to think they're really good. But we'll see. Penn State will be a good test. I don't think Penn State is the great team some people thought they were before the Ohio State game.
No.
They're still probably a top 10. They're still a top 15 team, if not top 10. They're salty. But we will learn more about Michigan in the coming weeks. Florida State, I think we kind of know what they are. And that's a really good team who could probably beat anybody on their day. Not that I'd pick them to win the playoff, but they're in the discussion. Mm-hmm. They got a lot of good players on that team.
When you look at their schedule too, Mike, it's like I feel like they've got some. I'm pulling it up right now. I feel like they've still got some teams left to play as well.
So they still have to play Miami and the Gators left. They're 2 in-state games. So they go to Pitt this weekend. Then they have Miami next weekend at home. Week after that, they got FCS North Alabama before their final game of the year in Gainesville to face the Gators on rivalry week.
Who knows who they're playing in the conference championship?
Yes, that's a great question. I happen to
It ain't going to be Clemson.
No, I think it's probably going to be Louisville. But the odd thing about that, after Florida State, we think they'll be in the ACC title game. There's 2 teams that control their destiny for the ACC other title spot, Louisville, and Virginia Tech is the other one, who was 3-1 in the conference at this point.
What?
Yeah. And Louisville and Virginia Tech play this weekend. So whoever wins that game will have a huge leg up in going to the conference title game.
Yeah, that's crazy. Virginia Tech's got Louisville, Boston College, North Carolina State, and Virginia. Because North Carolina lost to Georgia Tech last week, and that's what hurt their chances.
Yeah, Virginia Tech is 4-4 overall, but 3-1 in the ACC.
That's crazy.
Tied with Louisville for that next spot. Yeah,
that's crazy. Because when Virginia Tech was like, we were talking about at one point in the year as being one of the worst ACC teams. They lost to Purdue,
absolutely.
Got blown out by Rutgers, lost to Marshall, lost to Florida State, and we were sitting there looking at a 2-4 team, going, they're terrible. Yeah. But they've strung wins against Wake Forest and Syracuse, and now have Louisville this week and Boston College the week after. So
the 3 teams they've beaten aren't very good. With Pitt, Wake, and Syracuse. I don't think they can sustain it and go to the conference title game, but
it's a funny hypothetical.
Brent Pry at least has them trending in the right direction, and they're a lot better than they were last year.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Well, you got anything else you got to add?
No, that's all I got for tonight.
I think that's our show tonight then. Thank you for tuning in to Gridiron Eve. He's Mike Huseman. Follow him at HusemanCFB. I'm John Vogel. Follow me at Draft Vogel. You can follow the show at Gridiron Eve. Back at it next week, either with a 10-point or, we could push. In theory, we could push. It might still be 15.
In theory, we could. Yeah.
So
could be 10, could be 20 though. Yeah.
Again, the last challenge, Alabama, -3 over LSU. You've got Alabama. I got LSU. So we'll see how it goes. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We're going to wrap it up right there.